Friedrich Nietzsche's 10 rules for life. He would probably hate that I am oversimplifying his philosophies to this degree, as he is one of the most complex thinkers undoubtedly throughout time. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to our channel where we try to figure out what it means to be and how to become superhuman. Today I wanted to break down Friedrich Nietzsche's 10 rules for life. I do think he was one of the most profound thinkers in human history. Part of the reason that he is so famous is because of one thought that he had in particular, his proclamation that God is dead, that we were entering a non-religious epoch. A lot of people try to make it seem like he was celebrating this notion of an age without religion. However, it would be more aptly characterized as a fear of that age, because he thought that without God, we would end up becoming wrought with nihilism, and individuals would suffer from a lack of meaning and purpose. So what he sought out to do was essentially lay out a blueprint for individuals to follow and to be able to find meaning and purpose and drive in their life, something to propel them forward in the face of essentially meaningless. The first and arguably most important rule by Friedrich Nietzsche would be to cultivate individuality and to reject the herd mentality. He thought that people largely go insane or mad when they lose themselves into group identities, when all of a sudden the group becomes more important than the individual, and people would lose their sense of self in these collectives. So whether that be political movements or whether that be organized religion, one should seek to be a truly unique individual. And what ends up happening is when you are unique, groups will tend to cast you out because groups want you to reaffirm their own beliefs. Groups are inherently somewhere that individuality is not accepted. Nietzsche emphasizes this when he says, quote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Nietzsche's second rule for life would be to strive for self-mastery. This is very similar to rule number one. However, the difference would be once you know what makes you an individual, once you know what makes you different and special, to then try to bring that to the greatest degree possible, to try to emphasize those things and not just make them a small part of you, but rather the entire whole. What would be important to note here as well is, again, understand that the more unique you are, the more powerful you are, the more scrutiny you will come under. This is emphasized by Nietzsche's thought. One must shed the bad taste of wanting to agree with many. Good is no longer good when one's neighbor mouths it. And how should there be a common good? The term contradicts itself. Whatever can be common always has little value. In the end, it must be as it is and always has been. Great things remain for the great, abysses for the profound, nuances and shudders for the refined, and in brief, all that is rare for the rare. Embrace the things that make you different and lean into them. Focus on yourself and build your character as strong as you possibly can. Rule number 3 would be to embrace suffering. Friedrich Nietzsche did not think that one could ever escape suffering, rather believed that life itself is suffering and all that we can do is try to make use of it, that avoiding it is an impossibility. Nietzsche thought that suffering was pivotal in self-transformation. He pointed this out when saying, "Man, the boldest animal and the one most accustomed to pain does not repudiate suffering, he desires it. He even seeks it out, provided that he has been shown a meaning for it, a reason for suffering. The meaninglessness of suffering, and not suffering as such, has been the curse which has hung over mankind up until now. What he is saying here is that suffering without a purpose is what most people consider to be real suffering. However, if you focus on any truly great, no matter what it's in, whether it's be building tech, whether it's athletics, whether it's musicianship, almost all of these people had a very quote-unquote traumatic upbringing or a life characterized by suffering, and they used that suffering as a catalyst to make them a more competent and resilient person. The great among us are the ones who are able to take suffering and use it to their own benefit, and it is the weak and mediocre who try to avoid suffering. Rule number 4 for a good life from Friedrich Nietzsche would be to not lose yourself in battles along the way. One of his most famous quotes was, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster," pointing to the fact that most people, when they seek out on a noble aim as to conquer evil, they more or less tend to become evil themselves. There's so many great stories that articulate this. The Prestige by Christopher Nolan about two magicians who were once co-performers and then ended up becoming rivals. The whole movie is essentially dictating how these two become obsessed with just beating one another and then turn into the worst aspects of themselves. They lose all of their family and friends and loved ones along the way because they are just obsessed with besting the other. So do not become the type of people you want to rid the world of. Marcus Aurelius also actually echoes this sentiment when he said the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Rule number 5 for a Good Life by Friedrich Nietzsche: to be relentless in your pursuit of truth. We must be able to admit when we are wrong. He actually thought that it takes more nobility, a higher sense of character, to admit that you're wrong than to feel proud when you are right. He emphasizes this when saying, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind." Nietzsche thought most people weren't actually able to handle the truth, and rather they seek to dilute it or distort it in order to make them more comfortable. People will hold on to illusions if it makes their minds more at peace. Nietzsche actually believed that you could tell a lot about a person's character by how they interact with truth. He showed this when saying, "It might be a basic characteristic of existence that those who would know it completely would perish, in which case the strength of spirit should be measured in according to how much of the truth one could still barely endure. Or to put it more clearly, to what degree one would require it to be thinned down, shrouded, sweetened, blunted, and falsified." Seek freedom through responsibility. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that every ounce of responsibility you delegate to somebody else is actually relinquishing your freedom. He posits this when saying, "Freedom is the will to be responsible for ourselves." This speaks to something much larger going on in our society right now, which is this belief and this instinct to run to authority, to run to institutions to fix our lives for us. This would go directly contrary to everything that Nietzsche believes. You should become the type of person who is capable of solving your own issues in order to retain your freedom. Believe that every moment echoes for eternity. One of Friedrich Nietzsche's most famous concepts was eternal recurrence, and this was more of a thought experiment rather than a proclamation of how the world works, but he asked individuals to imagine every choice you make in your day-to-day will end up echoing for eternity, and you are bound to relive your life over and over again. How would that make you think about the choices you are about to make? If you were to loop back around in another life to this exact point, would you want to make the choice you're about to make, or are you making that choice for your immediate wants, not your long-term desires? So focus on making good choices. Make the choices that will lend themselves to you being a better person tomorrow, next year, 5 years, 10 years down the line. You can never get back your time, so spend it accordingly. Rule number 8 for Friedrich Nietzsche would be amor fati, meaning the love of fate. This would have been very common in, say, Stoic philosophy, to not have expectations or for desires for things to be different. Nietzsche took that concept and put it on steroids with amor fati, meaning that one shouldn't only wish things not to be different, but to love them, to embrace them exactly the way they are. He famously stated, "My formula for human greatness is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not in the future, not in the past, not for all eternity, not only to endure what is necessary, still less to conceal it, all idealism is falseness in the face of necessity, but to love it." So stop looking for the trials and tribulations in your life to go away, and rather embrace them and look at them as something that you can use to make yourself into a better and more capable person. Number 9, do not fear uncertainty and chaos, welcome it. Nietzsche thought that people who needed the world to be extremely ordinary and predictable are weak, that the strong and powerful among us, that the people with the best and most impressive characters are the ones who are able to live amidst chaos, because life is largely chaos. We have no idea why we're here, we have no idea where we're going, and it sort of becomes this embracing of chaos, and that being able to be somebody that not only deals with chaos but loves it, lives in it, will actually make you into a much better and unique person. He displayed this when he said, "I say unto you, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. I say unto you, you still have chaos in yourselves." If your life was predictable, if the movie you're watching is even predictable, if you know what is going to happen, it loses some of its magic. So do not expect your life, do not want it to be ordinary, do not want it to be orderly. Just like a roller coaster, the most exciting parts are the ups and downs. Many people take a completely different approach to life and just want to sit in the waiting bay and never actually take the ride that life has to offer. The 10th rule for a good life is to seek solitude. Nietzsche would think it is very important to make a distinction between isolation and solitude. Solitude is something individuals do voluntarily. Isolation is something that happens not by choice. He believed that solitude, choosing to go one's own way, to pull themselves away from large social circles, is the necessary steps to cultivating individuality, to essentially internalizing and putting forth all of the other rules I have previously outlined. Nietzsche did not think solitude was for the faint-hearted. He actually thought that some people, if they go into solitude, they might actually end up cracking, that they don't have a strong enough character to withstand it. However, he believed that this could also be used to make us stronger. He says, quote, "Solitude makes us tougher towards ourselves and tenderer towards others. In both ways, it improves our character." Nietzsche was actually very much a recluse, and he did not like large social gatherings and such. He pointed out, actually, that when I am among the many, I live as the many do, and I do not think as I really think. After a time, it always seems as if they want to banish myself from myself and rob me of my soul. This concept of solitude is not for everyone. If you are somebody who, like myself, dealt with, say, social anxiety most of their life, a crippling fear of not fitting in. It wasn't actually until I just said, maybe these aren't people I want to fit in with, that my life started improving in leaps and bounds, and I actually started loving myself much more. As cheesy as that sounds, it isn't until you are free from the constant judgments and opinions of others around you that you are able to form your own. So there you have it, Friedrich Nietzsche's 10 rules for life. Again, he would probably hate that I am oversimplifying his philosophies to this degree, as he is one of the most complex thinkers undoubtedly throughout time. I've read multiple of his books multiple times, and I still think I maybe only understand him 10 to 20%. The depths of his thinking are truly unmatched. I highly suggest picking up his original books and diving through them for yourself. Beyond Good and Evil and Thus Spoke Zarathustra are definitely the two main ones you should pick up. Also, if anyone else here has read Friedrich Nietzsche, please let us know in the comments below what are maybe some rules or advice that I left out. What are your favorite thoughts? Is there certain quotes or ideas that have just got you stirring from Friedrich Nietzsche? I would love to hear your thoughts. And before we get out of here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, as it helps us push along further, and we'll catch you next time.